It's late September in DC and the weather is still pretty warm. We're reaching into the low 80s almost every day lately, but the days are getting shorter and the weather is starting to cool off. And in anticipation of that, I have already started some cool season crops and I'm continuing to pop some seeds in these grow bags and in my beds. But I'm also not getting rid of all my summer plants just yet because they're continuing to produce. So it's an interesting time of transition, and there are a lot of decisions to make in the garden about what to keep, what to start, what to maybe retire until next season, and figuring all of this stuff out can be a little bit daunting. So I thought I'd share some of the things that I'm doing in hopes to help you have some ideas about how you might want to think about your fall garden as well. Overall, I've split my garden area into two sections. Originally, this space was all covered in grass, and I used cardboards and wood chips to provide the base to build the beds on, as well as these grow bags. Over here is a trellis area for my cucumbers, and the sun is really intense right now, so the leaves are wilting, which is really normal for them in this heat. As soon as it cools off, they will sort of plump back up and get back to normal. So you can see here that I have some older vines that are kind of on their way out, and I planted a new succession to replace those because there is plenty of growing season for these cucumbers. So this is an example of a plant where you want to continue successions so that you can continue to harvest cucumbers throughout a longer season versus just one flush. Back here I have a trellis set up for two climbing squashes. One is a Trombacino squash, the one with the really big leaves, and over here I have center cut squash, which is a combination or a crossbreed of the Trombacino as well as a zucchini. I only planted these in August, which is really late, normally speaking, for these plants, but because of the squash vine borer, this is a second try. They took out my earlier version of center squash, and that's when I also bought some Trombacino squash seed to try that as well. So these are relatively young for considering how late it is in the season. I'm hoping there's enough warmth and time for these plants to bear fruit. To keep things efficient, I'll just overlay exactly what's planted in each of these bags. So I can talk and walk and show you information all at the same time. Over here I have a little bit of a hodgepodge in these grow bags. Over here I have a white turnip, a white Japanese turnip that you eat pretty much like a radish. You eat fresh and young, and they're nice and gorgeous, crisp and sweet. Over here we have a bag of carrots that have just sprouted, and behind it we have a little experiment in the form of peanuts. These are giant Virginia peanuts. I think, truth be told, they've been struggling a little bit. I'm not sure that these grow bags were the best growing scenario for them. This one is definitely worse for wear. This one is doing okay. This is an example of a bed that I've turned over the course of the season. Earlier in the springtime, I had planted it with onions. You can see this sort of rogue onion that's left over here. But after I took them out, I popped some beets in, and I've been planting successions of these. So this first section I planted earlier, and then behind it I have some newer little baby sprouts coming in of beets as well. Behind here I have some solanaceous crops. I have a couple of shishito plants, as well as some Asian eggplants. And when I labeled my seedlings, I sort of messed things up and I confused a shishito with a bell pepper. So this is actually a very mutant looking bell pepper. I'm curious to see if this actually has any sort of spice, because the shape is certainly more like a chili pepper, but this is technically a bell pepper. So it'll be really interesting to see how it tastes. This is my vertical planter. It is a green stock planter with 30 different slots for various plants. My original plan was to have this full of strawberries, but I struggled in getting some bare root strawberries to take hold. So this is a mixture of several different species of strawberries I collected through the year to try to get them to work. This is the bare root actually that survived, and it's doing really well now that it's taken hold, but I lost like 90% of the plants. So I'm filling more and more of these slots just by propagating these plants from the runners. It's the one great thing about strawberries. They're really easy to propagate. So on top, what I've done with the empty spaces is just pop in some lettuce. It is a little bit warm for lettuce these days still. You can see this one is starting to bolt, so I'm gonna have to take this out, whereas this is nice and sort of squat. But this is probably one of the last few warm days of the year. When it's super hot, lettuce can get bitter, so this is not ideal, but it should be okay. It hasn't been too hot, so this will still be good eating. But this is an example of a plant where I wouldn't do the cut and come again method where I just clip off individual leaves. I'll be taking this whole head out and starting over. Over here I have a couple of experiments where I actually took suckers off of my main tomato plants and popped them in these planters to see what would happen, and they've really grown into full tomato plants that are bearing fruit. So this is a fun way to sort of plant successions without having to start new seeds. Over here I have my wall of peas. These are some of my absolute favorite plants to grow in the garden because they are my favorite little snacks to keep me going as I'm doing my work. I started these a few weeks ago, and I'm actually going to start another succession of them soon because I just can't get enough of these. I'm taking advantage of my fencing right here to use them like a trellis, so no additional work needed. But if you don't have a fence like this to put them next to, just pop them on a trellis. Over here in this bed, this is definitely an interesting transition period for it. Earlier in the season, I had corn in this bed, and what I had done was plant these long beans to be trellised up the corn. Unfortunately, the corn got taken out by a pest that bored into their stems and just ruined the whole thing. So I pulled the corn out and then pulled in these trellises to replace the corn. So I've trained the beans to go up these trellises now in replacement of that corn. And then the situation left this blank space in the rear side of the bed. So normally I would never design this with the beans up front. It basically blocks the sun from the back of the bed. So basically these beans should be back here, and these low growing plants should be in the front of it. But since I had the space, I just sort of tried to make do with it what I could. And what I did was pop in some cabbages and a sort of Hail Mary attempt at some squash. And because squash is a vining plant and can really spread out, I'm hoping it will get long enough to trail out so it can get its sun by moving away and out of the shadow of these beans. So on the right side we have our grow bags, and on the left side we have the chicken coop. And the chicken coop contains 6 beds in total, as well as some grow bags. And you might be wondering, why does she have a chicken coop? Chicken coops are designed to keep birds sort of safe inside. The reason why I have a chicken coop is to keep the birds out and away from my berries. So let's go through the plants that are in here. Up front I have 4 grow bags. Over here I have some blueberries. On the other side I have a blackberry, as well as some celery that I've just kind of let go. I planted those in the spring and harvested a few times, but truth be told, it's kind of an awkward place to get to, and I've just kind of let it go and do its thing. So now it's flowering, and it seems to be something that the pollinators are enjoying, so I'm just leaving it be for now. So in this first bed on the right, I have a mix of things, mostly solanaceous crops, and then I tucked in a melon. Unfortunately, it got hit with a fungus really bad. I sprayed it with some copper spray, and that seems to have kept it at bay, so it's looking a lot better. The new growth is looking pretty healthy. In the solanation bed, I have some ají amarillo peppers, as well as jalapeno and shishito, and then behind that I also have some eggplant. Oh yes, and of course I also have some bell peppers in here. So when I mislabeled my seedlings, I ended up mixing up my bell peppers and my shishitos, and I sort of messed things up. My intention was to keep them separate, but they ended up getting planted next to each other. Over here in the next bed, we have some brassica crops. So I planted these broccolis in August in anticipation for them really coming to maturity in the fall season when it got nice and cool. And I think I planted them a touch early. Next year I think I'd wait just a little bit longer because it's been kind of hot for them, but they seem to be doing pretty well. Over here I have some radishes, some carrots, and then behind that I have some bok choy. So I have watermelons planted on both sides of these two high beds, and they just run down and then go through the length of the coop. You can see here a good example of these dwarf watermelons. On top of these tall beds, I have a mix of some allium, some leeks, some bush beans, some Korean radish. That's going to get nice and big, and these are cool weather crops. So these are seeds that again planted about a month ago. And then this back massive greenery is sweet potatoes, and these I planted in early spring. On this side, I've planted a mix of things. Again, this is a bed that I've somewhat halfway turned over. So I used to have more brassicas in here and cauliflowers in the spring. I recently planted these with some bunching onions, some spring onions, and then more recently, you can see these tiny seedlings, I planted some kohlrabi. Of course, we have my favorite Swiss chard. And then in front here, I've planted some carrots. So here, I think I have some rainbow carrots. Back there, I had some shin-karotos. This little guy over here is a soybean plant. So I love growing edamame. The thing about soybeans, they don't take up too much space, but they do take up time, and it's not a continuous crop. Basically, it grows there flush and then it's pretty much done. We're back to the front of the coop, and I've planted most of this out with gailon, which is a Chinese broccoli. And I love these plants because you eat the stem primarily rather than the floret. So, and you can also eat the leaves. So it's kind of efficient from that standpoint because you basically eat everything that you see above ground. This is one of the areas I've let my edible garden sort of creep into my ornamental space. I have a few grow bags here that have some asparagus, and I also have a few grow bags that have some potatoes in them. But the thing that is really sort of unique about this area is it has my passion flower vine, and passion flowers are fantastic ornamental plants as well as providing edibles. And you can see here this flower is just incredible. It is such a unique shape, and the color is an incredibly vibrant purple. Right behind it, you see the fruit that is starting to mature. I truly don't know how long it's going to take to mature. It's been in this form and not really changing for maybe about a month. So I'm not sure how good the fruit will be this first season. But regardless, I am just so happy with how beautiful these flowers are. On the other side of the house, I've generally tried to keep things mostly ornamental, but I did steal some of this space for these artichokes. As you can see, the plants get really, really large, and I didn't want to take up precious space in the edible garden section. So I popped these next to the house because I think they actually look really cool, even just as ornamentals. And this is the first year. Only one of them actually produced the heads, the flowering heads, which is of course the edible part. And what happens is when they grow out of this sort of center here and grow sort of pretty nice and tall, and they are beautiful if you let them go to flower as well. So you could treat these purely as ornamental. I think they're really cool. And what happens is this is the one that had produced over here, and I cut the stem right off, as you can see here, and what it's doing is already throwing up an entirely new plant right next to it. Actually, it looks like two. So you can see how these are perennial and the way they grow and come back year after year. Another area that I've snagged on the ornamental side for edibles, most importantly, my wall of tomatoes. I wouldn't necessarily have chosen to do this way, but it really was the only super sunny space I had left to put tomatoes. So I took this whole back wall because the south, as you can see my shadow, the south the southern sun hits it directly, and this area just gets so much sun. So it really is perfect for tomatoes, and as you can see, they love it, and they are continuing to produce. Even so late in September going into October, they show no signs of slowing down. This beautiful plant over here is okra, and I decided to plant this in the ornamental section because it grows beautiful flowers. Okras are part of the hibiscus family, and you can see here, unfortunately none are open right this very second, but I'll pop in a shot of one that's open. They make beautiful ornamental flowers, and I think as plants they have really pretty foliage, so I think they look fine in the ornamental section, and I'm happy to continue to grow them out here. In this grow bag here, I actually have some ginger. And ginger grows from a rhizome, and you can see some of the new shoots coming up, and it loves the warm weather, so it's been doing great over the course of the summer. As it gets cooler, it will start to die back, and that's when we can harvest it. Thank you for joining me on a tour of my September garden. I'd love to hear about what you might be growing in yours, especially if you're living in different zones. It's really fun to think about all the different possibilities based on your climate. Thanks again for joining me, and see you next time. Over the summer, I actually had it filled with corn. Oh, thank you. You know, I'd really love to share